Hello everybody, welcome to another lesson. This lesson is on the chromatic scale. It's a guide to recognising and writing the chromatic scale. And like all the other lessons, its intention is to improve general musicianship, but primarily it's for students who are wishing to do the examination in any recognised board, grade 5 standard. So what is a chromatic scale? A chromatic scale is a scale in which all of its movement from note to note are in steps, semitones. Now, I've used the phrase semitones, but I will explain in the last slide that there is a certain problem with using the phrase semitone, but for now it's in steps or semitones. Now, if you follow the lesson that I did for you for minor scales, you will note that we had 3 different types of minor scale. Well, there are also, when doing chromatic scales, 2 different types of chromatic scale. There's one that's called the harmonic chromatic and the other that's called the melodic chromatic. Now, in the very early part of the lesson, I've used a piano keyboard. I've only used it as a graphic association. So don't worry too much if you can't read the notes on the piano keyboard. We can omit this later on in the lesson. And you will be able to associate this to your own instrument, providing you remember that the chromatic scale is just ascending and descending in steps. Now I'm going to deal first of all with the harmonic chromatic scale. Okay, step 1, have a look at the picture of the piano and notice how I've numbered the first 13 semitones, the first 13 steps, starting from the note C. You can see C is number 1, then it goes up a semitone to C sharp or D flat, which is number 2, then it goes to 3, which is the D, 4, D sharp or E flat, etc. Step number 2, we're going to write out the notes from C to C. Just 8 simple notes. Step number 3, we're going to double up on all the notes, except for the first note, the first degree or the tonic, the note C in this particular case, and the 5th note, that's the 5th degree or the dominant. So let's double up on all of them except for the 1st and the 5th. Now don't forget, the last note was originally number 8, is also the top tonic, so that's like number 1 but an octave higher, so you don't double up on that. So if you want to remember it as 1, 5 and 8, double up on all the others. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're just using the piano keyboard for the graphics. So we look underneath the scale as written out. What we're going to do is we're going to add the accidentals to change the notes so as they form semitone steps. So we'll look at number 1 at the keyboard is the note C, so number 1 on the written out notation is also the note C. We then rise to number 2 on the piano keyboard, which can be a choice of either C sharp or D flat. So we look at the note that was available on the written out score and we notice that number 2 originally was a D. We have to insert the flat sign, so our choice has been D flat. We look at number 3, that can only be a D, and therefore on the music it remains as a D. Number 4 can be a choice of either D sharp or E flat. Number 4 on the raw score was just an E, so we have to insert the natural sign to make it E flat, and so on. Now, most textbooks will just show you from the note C. Let's do another one from a different note. Let's start on the note E. Again, I've used the piano keyboard just as a graphic comparison. You can see the note E is now number 1 on the piano keyboard, F is number 2, number 3 is F sharp or G flat, etc. This time on our score we're writing out the notes from E up to the top E, and we're doubling up on all the notes except for 1, 5 and 8. So therefore in this particular case we're not going to double up the note E, which is number 1. We're not going to double up number 5, which is the note B, and we're not going to double up on 8, which is the top E. Once we've numbered it out as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. up to 13, we then go to the next point, which will be to insert the correct accidentals to make sure that the scale is, in this case, ascending in steps. And here we can see we insert the correct accidentals to make the run of semitones or steps correct. So on the piano keyboard, number 1 on the score is an E. That's the only choice at the moment we need to do. Number 2 on the score is an F. That's corresponding to the F note. Number 3 on the piano keyboard is an option between an F sharp or a G flat. So therefore on the score it's also a raw note with an F. We have to include the sharp sign to make it an F sharp. Number 4 is the note G, corresponds to the one on the keyboard. Number 5 on the keyboard is an optional one, as in it could be a G sharp, it could be an A flat. Because we've been given the note G, it has to be the G sharp. We insert the accidental, and so on up to the 13th. Now, if I said at the beginning about using a piano keyboard, it's simply a graphic comparison, so you can see the notes written out on the scale compared to the actual notes. So if, for example, you land on a note that can be either a sharp or a flat when you're using a piano keyboard, you can tell by the written scale which is the correct option to choose. Example, is it C sharp? Is it D flat? The raw note on the scale is a D. You would choose at the D flat, so therefore you would put the flat side in front of the natural D. So up to now I've just shown you some examples of harmonic chromatic using accidentals. Sometimes in an examination you'll be required to do a chromatic from a starting note but inserting a key signature. So for example, we're going to do a harmonic chromatic starting from the note B using a key signature. Now all we do that's different is we do exactly the same thing as before. You prepare it as usual. You write the notes from B up to B. You double up on all of them except for 1, 5 and 8. Now this time, firstly, you insert the major key signature for the starting note. So as it was B, we're treating B as the tonic, therefore we're going to insert the key signature for B major. As you can see there, we've got 5 sharps, F, C, G, D and A. We've got the B up to the B. We've doubled up on all of them except for 1, 5 and 8. Now of course the key signature is now going to alter the notes within that particular score. So for example, note number 2 is already C sharp because of the key signature. Now once we've inserted the key signature and we've actually gone up our correct 13 steps, we now insert the correct accidentals to make the run of steps correct. So now if you look at the diagram, B is number 1. It was originally C sharp, but from B to C sharp is a full tone step, so we need to take the semitone to C natural, therefore we have to alter the C sharp with a natural sign. The next bar gives us the C sharp because of the key signature. The next raw note would have been D sharp because of the key signature, but we want the semitone step between C sharp and D natural, so therefore we have to put a natural sign in front of the D, etc. again. Now of course again, things to be very careful of. If you're required to complete a descending harmonic chromatic scale, just like any descending scale, the degrees are counting back down. You don't count from the first note and say number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so you'll be doubling up on the wrong notes. You must remember the original scale is going 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So when you're doubling up, make sure that you're looking at the right notes to not double up. So the 1, 5 and 8 still applies. Okay, the 8th note in the scale, as in the top tonic, will be the A. That's the one you're going to be remaining on its own, and etc. They'll put a little diagram showing the squares around the notes that are singular and not doubled up. Last but not least, you do exactly the same thing. You insert your accidentals to complete the run of steps, take into account if you've had to include a key signature. In this particular case, you can see it's A flat. So that was the harmonic chromatic. Now the second form of chromatic is called the melodic chromatic scale. Now the melodic chromatic scale is very similar to the melodic minor scale in that it's different ascending than it is descending. So also the melodic chromatic starts off exactly the same as the harmonic chromatic, as in writing it out from tonic to tonic. The difference is in which notes are not doubled up. So like the harmonic where it was 1, 5 and 8, this is different. It's the same structure to start off with. You find your original 8 notes, you double up on different ones in this particular melodic chromatic scale. Now the new arrangement for this chromatic scale is called melodic set form. So if you come across that phrase set form, this is exactly what is required from the examination boards when they ask you to complete a melodic chromatic from a set point. So let's have a look at writing one out. So as mentioned, the melodic chromatic starts off exactly the same as the harmonic chromatic, as in you write out tonic to tonic. So you can see in this particular case, I've gone from the D up to the D, back down to the D again. Okay, we're going to be doing a melodic chromatic from the note D, and again without a key signature. Now this time, we're going to double up on all the notes, but not like the harmonic scale. This time we have a different doubling up on the ascending scale than it is descending. So the ascending scale, you will double up on the 3rd, the 7th and the 8th. And on the degrees coming down that are not doubled is going to be just the 1st and the 4th. So ascending is 3, 7, 8, descending is 4 and 1. And exactly the same as before, once we've got the correct doubling up of the notes, you now insert the accidentals to make the run of steps, semitones, correct. So you'll notice now from D, up a step we go to D sharp, we go to E, we go to E sharp, etc. So it's just so as you can compare the same scale, first of all without a key signature and then with the key signature. All we've got to look at the second part is, because we started off at the note D, we're going to insert the key signature for D major, which is F sharp and C sharp. So when we've got using the key signature, we must make sure we take that into account. Now, obviously, again, things to watch out for. When you're doing an examination, you will not be asked to use a key signature when asked to write a chromatic scale starting from a note that can't be associated to a major scale, such as G sharp. There isn't a G sharp major scale. And then when you're asked to start a chromatic scale from the same note, from the G sharp, you still use the same note doubling up method as shown, but when adding the accidentals, remember to immediately insert the sharp sign before that very first G, because that's where you're going to be starting is G sharp, and then you alter it from there. You insert any accidentals to create the run of semitones correct, but obviously starting from the G sharp. Now that's in both forms, both the harmonic and the set form melodic. Now, last but not least is with regards to what I mentioned on the first slide. I've used the term semitone to describe the step between two notes. Now, as students who have completed the lesson on intervals, you will understand that the term semitones is also described as a minor second. So please be aware that that's technically not all the intervals between the notes in a chromatic scale. They're not all necessarily a minor second. So for example, if you went from C to D flat, that is a minor second. But if you went from example C to D sharp, that in effect is an augmented first. So technically speaking, it's not necessarily a semitone, but I have used that just to mention the fact that the semitone is a descriptive word to describe when two notes are just one step apart. So I'm really mentioning that in case a student is questioning this fact. So hopefully now, if you go over this lesson numerous times, like I told you in the introductory video, that will be able to answer the question that is required and be able to write out both forms of chromatic scale with and without a key signature. Now I hope you found the lesson helpful, and if you have and you think you might be able to find another lesson helpful, please just log on to Pagan Music and watch some of the other videos. Thanks for listening.